Okay, of course, now we move to a new lesson or a new chapter, which is demand and consumer choice. In this chapter, of course, we're going to discuss very important topics. The very first thing, that is used in this chapter is the topic about the diamond water paradox. Basically, this is a topic that most books usually discuss because it is the concept in these chapters will determine or will have a kind of the solution to this kind of paradox. This diamond water paradox, let's introduce that paradox by saying that water is cheap and diamond are expensive, but water is very necessary to life. It's more useful to life, and diamond is not. And diamonds are not necessary to life. Isn't that odd, even paradoxical? The 18th century British macroeconomist Adam Smith wondered about this question. He noticed that often things with the greatest value in use, that is, things that are most useful, are or have low price or low value in exchange. So his observation later on came to be known as the diamond water paradox. The diamond water paradox was the problem that many classical economists later on used to determine that value in use could not determine value in exchange, the price. Diamonds, although less useful than water, is more expensive than water. The discussion, about the diamond water paradox went on for a long time. And many famous economists, mathematicians, and philosophers such as William Stanley Jeffens and Leon Walras and others took part in that debate. The confusion at the beginning over the diamond water paradox arose because of a lack of distinction between total utility, the concepts of total utility and marginal utility. So basically, as you can see over here, the total utility, that is the total satisfaction, happiness, usefulness of water is high because it is so useful to life. And the total utility of diamonds is relatively low, very low, because diamonds are not as useful as water. The marginal utility of water is low. Why is that? Because water is abundant, is plentiful, and that people consume it at low marginal utility. We're talking about marginal utility, we're talking about the extra utility that a consumer receives when consuming an extra or additional unit of water or additional glass of water. So the marginal utility of water is very low. Why? Because water is plentiful. How about diamonds? The marginal utility of diamonds, of course, is very high. Why? Because, as you can see, diamonds are so scarce, so rare, and consumers usually buy them at high marginal utility. The extra unit of diamonds that consumers, the extra unit of diamonds that consumers, buy is very expensive. Okay. Therefore, price will reflect marginal utility rather than total utility, because the marginal utility of diamonds is very high. Therefore, the price of diamonds is high, and because the marginal utility of water is low, water is very cheap relative to diamonds. So now we have a solution to this question, which is the diamond-water paradox. Okay, so the marginal utility will determine the value in exchange or the price rather than total utility. So as you can see, the concepts in this chapter basically will help us to come up with a solution of the diamond-water paradox. Now, let's define basically some concepts. Utility, which is the most important concept here. Utility, of course, is a measure of happiness or satisfaction or benefit that a consumer receives when consuming, of course, a good or a service. Of course, the unit that is used to measure utility is called util. Of course, util is an arbitrary unit used to measure utility. Of course, we have to differentiate. Of course, it is subjective. Utility is subjective kind of measure. It's not like the other, measures of weight or length or so on and so forth. Okay, when we say somebody weight 100 kilogram, this is standard. He is 100 kilogram is known to everybody. However, when we say that somebody consumes a good and receives 100 utils, of course this is subjective, so we don't know how much that equals. Okay, so it depends, difference from one person to another. Now, so util is the measure that is used, or is the unit that is used to measure utility. Now, total utility is the total benefit or satisfaction that a person receives from consuming a certain quantity of a good. We're going to, of course, discuss that, later on as we progress in this chapter. The marginal utility, of course, we're going to, use MU to denote marginal utility. Of course, is the additional or extra utility, of course, that a person, gets or receives when consuming an extra unit of a good or additional unit of a good or a service. Of course, it is the change, mathematically, marginal utility is calculated by, using the formula, marginal utility is equal change delta TU over delta Q. Change in total utility over change in Q. So which is TU2 minus TU1 over Q2 minus Q1. Okay? Now, the law of diminishing marginal utility. Okay? Here, of course, as you can see, when you consume more of a good, the total utility will increase. However, the marginal utility will decrease. So what actually we mean when we say law of diminishing marginal utility, it is the fact that the additional utility declines, as the quantity consumed increases. Okay, when you consume more of a good, the additional utility will decline. And this phenomena is, of course, it's called of course, we're going to say it is the law of diminishing marginal utility. It is always common that when you, of course, consume additional unit of a good, of course, what happens? Of course, the marginal utility or the additional utility will decline, or the less happiness or benefit is received per additional unit as more units are consumed. The law of diminishing utility, of course, is illustrated in the presentation below. This is, this table here, gives you, some data about the total utility and marginal utility. Okay, here we have the person consumes from 0 units all the way till 5 units. So as you can see, as the number of units, successive units increases, the total utility increases. However, it increases at a decreasing rate. It increases at a decreasing, of course, rate. Now, of course, now, as you can see, when he consumes nothing, of course, he gets 0 utility, of course. And then, as you can see, when you consume the first unit, he gets 100 utils, 2 units, 190 units, 3, it increases. However, it increases at a decreasing rate, okay? It increases at a decreasing rate. Now, of course, the marginal utility, as you can see, it decreases, okay? 100, 90, 80, 70, 60. So, as you can see, more consumption of a good, it means more total utility. However, less marginal utility, okay? So, this is the graph of total utility. As you can see, the total utility is increasing. This is here, total utility graph. And this is marginal utility graph. As you can see, the marginal utility is a decreasing curve, and the total utility is an increasing curve. However, it increases at a decreasing rate. So as you can see, from this table and these two graphs, the graph of total utility and the graph of marginal utility, as you can see, the total utility curve is upward sloping, the marginal utility is downward sloping, which emphasizes the law of diminishing marginal utility. As you can see, the more consumption of good will cause the additional utility to. A new topic in the new chapter we just presented, which is demand and consumer choice, is maximizing utility. Of course, the most direct way of calculating how a consumer, of course, spends all his or her income to maximize his or her total utility is to make a table, and that table, of course, consists of of some columns. That one column consists of the number of units of first good that he wants to consume, and the other column, of course, in the table consists of the units of the other good that he wants to consume. Of course, within that table, we have to include, of course, as you can see over here, the total utility that corresponds to each unit of a good that the consumer consumes. For instance, over here, as you can see, we have a table, of course, that consists of 3 things. The first consists of the quantities, the units of the number of units of movies. So the consumer is to consume, movies and hot dogs, of course. And so we make a table. The first column consists of the, the number of units of movies that the consumer purchases or buys. And then the second column consists of the utilities. Okay, for instance, when he consumes no, or when he sees no movies, of course, he gets no utilities at all. When he consumes or sees one movie, then he gets 50 utilities. Of course, as we mentioned previously, that the units of utility, of course, utility is measured by utilities, of course. Therefore, he gets 50 utilities. And then when he sees two movies, he gets 88 utilities, 3 movies, 121 utilities, and so on and so forth. As you can see, the utilities or the total utility is increasing. However, it increases at a decreasing rate. Now, of course, here the middle column, total utility, total utility here is the utility derived from consuming movies. Now here, total utility, the middle column here, is total utility derived from consuming both goods, which are movies and hot dogs. So if we go to hot dogs, okay, under the hot dogs, we have 2 columns. The first one, quantity consumed, of course. We started from 0 all the way to 10. Of course, when he consumes 0 hot dogs, he gets 0 utility. When he consumes 2 hot dogs, he gets 117 utilities. When he consumes 4 hot dogs, he gets 181 columns, and so on and so forth. As you can see, as more hot dogs are consumed, the number of total utility will increase. However, it increases, at a decreasing rate. Now, the middle column over here is total utility derived from both goods consumed, from movies and hot dog. So here what we say, as I said, the direct way to calculate, of course, to find the number of combination of good X or good movies and hot dogs is to make a table, and then of course it trace, of course, the highest value of total utility that is derived from both. As you can see over here, here 313 is the highest level of total utility when the Omar, as a matter of fact, the consumer is Omar, okay, consumes movies and hot dogs. Now, as you can see here, Omar has an income which is $30, as you can see over here, and he is to spend the $30 on movies and, of course, hot dogs. The price of each movie, the cost of each movie is $6, and the cost of each hot dog is $3. So the prices of hot dogs and movies are given, and the income that Omar has is $30. So he has $30 to spend on movies and hot dogs, and we are going to find out how the combinations of movies and hot dogs that will maximize Omar's total utility. So the direct way is to trace the highest amount of total utility, and that method, of course, as you can see, is called consumer equilibrium. Okay, that's called consumer equilibrium. As you can see, the combination of movies and hot dogs that Omar consumes in order to maximize his total utility is 2 movies. That is, he sees 2 movies and consumes 6 hot dogs. Okay, and remember that 2 movies cost $12 because each movie costs $6. So 2 will be $12, and then 6 hot dogs cost $18. So 18 plus 12, that will come up with $30, which is the amount of income that he has to spend on these 2 goods. So that will give you 313. So this is the highest amount of total utility. So here, this method is called consumer equilibrium. Of course, that consumer equilibrium, of course, is directed or stated as follows. The combinations of good movies and hot dogs that will give you the highest level of utility, that will show us the combination that will maximize his total utility. So it's called consumer equilibrium, or maximizing his utility. So this method of focusing upon the highest amount of total utility is called consumer equilibrium. Now this consumer equilibrium mean what? It means it is a situation in which the consumer has spent all his or her available income in the way that, given the prices of the goods that he wants to consume, maximizes his total utility. Of course, a better way, of determining consumer equilibrium is, that does not take into consideration, finding, total utility at all, which is, it is equalizing margin utility per dollar spent. So this is the method that we will, present now, which is equalizing marginal utility per dollar spent. Instead of just focusing upon total utility, no, the better method of finding the combination of the goods that maximizes total utility, the consumer's total utility, is by equalizing margin utility per dollar spent. So for instance, if the consumer is to consume two goods, X and Y, given their prices and his income, then to maximize his total utility, to find the combination of goods X and Y that will maximize his or her total utility, is to equate the marginal utility per dollar spent on these two goods. So we say marginal utility of X over price of X should equal marginal utility of Y over price of Y. Okay, this is equalizing marginal utility, per dollar spent on these two goods. So the marginal utility per dollar spent is the marginal utility, derived from the last unit of a good consumed. And that the marginal utility per dollar is the marginal utility of the last unit of the good consumed divided by the price of that good. Okay? The price of the good. And as you can see here, therefore, Omar, if we're talking about Omar, who is to buy movies, to see movies and purchase, hot dog, Omar maximizes his total utility when he spends all his available income, and when, here, Formula 1, the margin utility of movies over price of movies should equal margin utility of hot dogs over price of hot dog, where MUM is equal margin utility of the last, unit of movies, consumed or seen over the price of movie. Here, as you see, the price of movie is $6, the price per movie. Should equal the margin utility of hot dog, over the price of hot dog, And we can, extend this. Instead of, the consumer consumes two goods, he could consume 3 goods or 4 goods, and use that formula, extend that formula to include 3 goods or 4 goods or more than that, and asking the question that what combination of these goods, given the prices of these goods and the available income of that consumer, will maximize his or her total utility. So, for instance, if we have more than 2 goods, A, B, C, and so on and so forth, then the formula becomes margin utility of A over price of A, or the margin utility of the last unit of good A consumed over price of good A, equal margin utility of the last unit of good B consumed over price of good B, should equal also marginal utility of the last unit of goods C consumed over price of C, and so on and so forth. So this is, equalizing marginal utility per dollar spent. Now, we give an example over here to, apply that formula, of course, which is equalizing marginal utilities per dollar spent to solve a question that asks about the combination of goods that will maximize the consumer total utility. So the question say that Salim enjoys CDs and novels, okay, and spends $60 a month on them. In other words, he has $60 to spend on, CDs and, of course, novels. The table below shows utility he gets from each good. In other words, you're going to have a table, okay, and you have different columns. In that table, in order to use the equalizing of marginal utility per dollar, we should include in that table the number of units consumed of each good. We should include the total utility gained for each unit of a good. We should include the marginal utility of each unit consumed. We should include the marginal utility per dollar spent for each good. As these are, of course, stated over here. So, for instance, here, this is the quantity, of course, 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 6 units, okay? And that quantity is for, CDs and for novels. So the first column is the quantities. Now, the second column is total utility. TU is total utility of CD. Now, when he consumes the first unit, he gets 60 utils. The second unit of CD, he gets 110 utils. The third unit, he gets 150 utils. The fourth unit, he gets 180 units, 80 utils, and 5 units of CDs he get or he receives 200 utils, and 6 units of CD he of course receives 206 units. As you can see, when he consumes more CDs, you will get more total utility. Total utility will increase, however, it increases at a decreasing rate. Now, the marginal utility, of course, we have already discussed the concept of marginal utility, which is basically the change in total utility over the change in the quantity. So, the marginal utility for the first unit is the same thing, 60. The marginal utility for the second unit is what? TU2 minus TU1. This is TU2, correspond to the second unit of CD. 110 minus 60 over 2 minus 1, which is 110 minus 60 is 50. So this is 50 is the marginal utility of consuming the second unit of CD. Now, the marginal utility of the third unit is going to be equal 150 minus 110 over 3 minus 2. And we're going to get 40 utils. Of course, the marginal utility is also, the units of it is utils. Same thing, the marginal utility for, consuming the fourth unit of CD is going to be 180 minus 150 over 4 minus 3. We get 30. And the marginal utility for the fifth unit consumed is going to be 200 minus 180 over 5 minus 4. We get 20, and so on and so forth. Of course, the same thing here. We're going to have marginal utility of CD over a price of CD. Over price of CD. Now, what we do here, we just divide, 60 over the price of CD. The price of CD is that, remember that, say that if CDs and novels both cost $10 each, that is, one CD is cost, $10, one novel is cost $10. So therefore, we divide 60 over 10, 6, 50 over 10, 5, 40 over 10, 4, and so on and so forth. You get these are the marginal utility, per dollar. Same thing, we go to movies, Of course, when Salim consumed the first unit of movie, he gains what? He gains 20 utils. When he consumed the second unit of movie of a novel, he gains 38 or he receives, 38 utils. All of these are in utils. Remember these utils. All of them are in utils. So as you can see, the units of total utility in utils, the same thing over here in utils. So now, as you can see, we state all utilities correspond to the different amounts of units of novels. As you can see, total utility increases, but it increases at a decreasing rate when he consumes, when he progresses in the consumption of novels. How about marginal utility? Of course, marginal utility is the change in total utility over the change in the quantity. That is, for the first one is 20. The second one, of course, which is TU2 minus TU1, 38 minus 20 over 2 minus 1, and we come up with 18. The third one we get 15. The fourth one we get 11. For the fifth one we get 6. And for the sixth one we get 5. Okay? And now here, what we do, we divide the marginal utility per price, which is 10. We divide the marginal utility over the price of novel to get the marginal utility per price or per dollar, and we come up with these, values of the marginal utility per dollar. Now, the second step, of course, is to compare. To compare only this column here, this column, as you can see, we need to compare this column here with this. Now, our job, finally, after we finish the table, okay, calculate the marginal utility or total utility if it's not given, sometimes the question will give you the marginal utility and ask you to find the total utility. It's easy. Now, after finishing the table, we have to focus upon this column and that column. The marginal utility, of CD per dollar and the marginal utility of novels per, dollar. This is the one that we want to focus upon. So what we do, we come over here. 6, do we have 6 over here? We don't have 6. Okay, ignore it. 5, do we have 5 over here? We don't have 5. Ignore it. 4, do we have 4? We don't have 4. Ignore it. 3, do we have a 3? We don't have a 3. Ignore it. 2, do we have 2 over here? Yes. 2 over here and 2, they are equal. Great. Okay, so here, as you can see, the very first thing is that we have to compare the marginal utility per dollar spent on CD with the marginal utility per dollar spent on novels. Now we find out that there is 2 over here, they are equal. Great. Okay. Now, in the process of eventually finding the combination of goods that will maximize his or her total utility, we have another condition. The first condition, we should make sure that the marginal utilities per dollar spent are equal for both goods. And this is what we get, 2 equal 2. Okay, great. Now, the second condition, we have to make sure that the expenditure on these 2 goods, for instance, 2 corresponds to 5 units with respect to CDs. So 2 correspond to 5 units. Now, 5 CDs, how much they cost? 5 times 10, 50. Because each CD costs 10. So 5 times 10, that's what you get you 50. Great. Now, how about here? 2 corresponds to 1. How much one novel costs? $10. 1 times 10, 10. 10 plus 50, 60, which is great. So as you can see, the total expenditure on these 2, on 5 and 1 is equal 60, which is the amount of income that Salim has, because he is to spend all his income on CDs and, of course, novels. So therefore, we can say that since the 2 conditions are satisfied, the marginal utility per dollar spent are equal for both goods, and then the total income of these 2 units of CDs and novels, 6 CDs, and of course 5 CDs and 1 novel, of course, will total expenditure on these will equal the total income he has. Therefore, the two conditions are satisfied, and we say eventually that Salim should consume 5 CDs and 1 novel in order to maximize his total utility. And so we say, as I said, therefore Salim should consume 5 CDs and 1 novel to maximize his total utility. And this is how we, solve the question. Make sure that to use the consumer equilibrium, which is the second part of consumer equilibrium, which is equalizing margin to EBITDA, is to do like this. Eventually focus upon the columns that consist of what? Of the margin to EBITDA, and compare them. Of course, for instance, if here 2 equal 2. However, if the total expenditure of 5 and 1 are greater than or less than 60, then we have to move to another, units or another values of margin to EBITDA spent that are equal, so that the corresponding units of the goods consumed will give you, of course, the total value of income that the consumer has.